The fluorescent lights of the county fair food tent hummed, casting a sickly glow on Sarah's face as she typed. Her phone vibrated on the table, and over her shoulder, on Walt's screen, the words flashed. Walt says he'll cover our tracks. Can't wait to see you tonight. My own phone, vibrating in my pocket, felt like a dead weight. Walt, my captain, met my eyes from across the crowded table. A slow, knowing smile spreading across his face as he took a long swig of his beer. The darkness of County Road Y29 was absolute, broken only by the anemic glow of my patrol car's dashboard. The air conditioner hummed, a lonely sound in the quiet. My phone, still in my hand, showed the message again, a stark white against the dark screen. Walt says he'll cover our tracks. Can't wait to see you tonight. It wasn't meant for me, it was Sarah's, sent to Walt, my captain. The words felt heavier than any siren, louder than any gun blast. They echoed in the hollow space inside me, mirroring the empty stretch of asphalt before the cruiser. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, the cool plastic unforgiving under my fingers. Just then, the dispatch radio crackled to life, pulling me back. Liz Jenkins' smooth, professional voice cut through the silence. All units, possible 207, female child, Lily, 7 years old, abducted by non-custodial father Clint Sawyer, an unknown accomplice. Last seen leaving residence in Cherokee Flats, 14 minutes ago. I acknowledged, the terse 10-4 sounding foreign in my own ears. The burning anger for Sarah and Walt was a live coal in my gut, but a child's life now hung in the balance. Professionalism was a shield I had learned to wear, one that now had to block out the wreckage of my own life. I pulled up the file on Clint Sawyer on my laptop, the screen illuminating my face with a harsh, blue light. A rap sheet unfurled. Assault, parole violations, a few domestic disturbances. Troublemaker, the notes read. It was an understatement. He was known for being volatile, a loose cannon in a county where most problems simmered quietly. Then came the Amber Alert, a stark banner across the laptop screen. 1998 Maroon Plymouth Voyager, license VDA 64L. The details solidified the abstract into something tangible. Urgent. Cherokee Flats was 2 hours southeast. Just 14 minutes ago, I murmured to myself. They could be anywhere, but likely heading north or west, away from the river. I needed to intercept them, to cut them off before they hit the interstate and vanished into the night. I slammed the cruiser into drive, the engine roaring as I peeled off the shoulder. My Crown Vic devoured the blacktop of County Road Y29, heading for US 120. No lights, just the raw urgency of the moment, the knowledge of a little girl out there, scared. Folks out here, they knew this old highway. It was the back way, twisting through cornfields and small forgotten towns. But if you knew it, if you pressed hard, it was the fastest route to get where you needed to be. They'd likely stick to it for a while, hoping to avoid patrol cars on the main roads. About 10 minutes later, I spotted the skeletal remains of an abandoned gas station on the right, surrounded by a graveyard of rusted-out cars. Perfect. I guided the Crown Vic behind a pile of twisted metal and dead weeds, the vehicle partially hidden from the road. The waiting felt like a raw wound, every second stretching into an eternity. I checked my sidearm, the familiar weight in my holster. Then the shotgun, propped against the passenger seat, the AR-15 in the trunk. I hoped, with a quiet desperation, that I wouldn't need any of them. A distant rumble grew louder. Headlights appeared, cutting through the dense night, approaching from the north. An old Chrysler minivan. Dark maroon. My gut tightened, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I grabbed the radar gun, thumbing the switch. The digital readout flashed, 71 mm. Just enough to make you look twice, but not enough to scream, fleeing. As the vehicle passed, I leaned forward, my breath catching in my throat. Through the dusty rear window, I saw the bearded driver, his hands clamped tight on the wheel. Clint Sawyer. My plan to hide, to catch them off guard, had worked. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drum in the quiet car. Sweat beaded on my palms. I pulled the Crown Vic out, the tires spitting gravel. The license plate was clear. VDA 64L. I had them. I kept a steady distance behind Clint's beat-up minivan, the smell of burning oil thick and acrid in the cool night air. The tailpipe coughed a thin stream of blue smoke. The vehicle had seen better days, probably decades ago, and I knew it wouldn't outrun my Crown Vic. Not on these long, flat stretches of US 120. In the rearview mirror, I saw Clint's head snap up. His shoulders tensed. His lips, framed by a scruffy beard, formed the silent words, "Oh no." He knew the game was on. No lights, no siren, just the quiet, relentless pursuit down the empty highway. I keyed my mic. 1725 to dispatch. I have eyes on the suspect vehicle, 1998 maroon Plymouth Voyager, license VDA 64L, heading northbound on US 120, approximately 5 miles north of the Cherokee Flats exit. Liz Jenkins's voice, calm and professional, responded. Copy that, 1725. Keep us updated. Her steady tone was a small anchor, grounding me for a moment against the rising tide of my own thoughts. The memory of Sarah and Walt still a bitter aftertaste. Clint stomped on the gas. The minivan with its dying engine protested, but picked up speed, weaving slightly within its lane. He was desperate, trying to lose me on the endless ribbon of asphalt, hoping I'd get impatient or lose sight in the darkness. But the road was straight, the night clear. There was no escaping. It was time. I flipped the switch. The Crown Vic's V8 engine roared, a deep, guttural growl that resonated through the chassis. The siren wailed, a piercing cry in the silent night. My lights, a blinding cascade of red and blue, lit up the minivan's rear window, painting Clint's face in stark, flickering colors. The distance between us closed steadily. Clint, in a last-ditch effort, jerked the wheel hard to the right. The minivan veered off the highway, tires spitting gravel, and plunged down a narrow, unpaved road. Thick plumes of dust bloomed behind him, obscuring his path, heading towards a cluster of old, derelict farm buildings in the distance. A confrontation was coming. I knew it. I radioed for backup, even as I followed, the gravel crunching under my tires. 1725 to dispatch. Suspect vehicle just turned off US 120 onto County Road 34, heading towards the old Miller farm. Requesting backup, code 3. Copy that, 1725. Units are en route, ETA 25 minutes. Liz's voice was steady, but 25 minutes was a lifetime out here. I was on my own for a bit. The minivan slammed to a halt next to a derelict barn, its side rotting, its roof sagging. Clint flung the driver's side door open, scrambling out. His eyes were wide, wild, and in his hand, a dull glint of metal caught the cruiser's flashing lights. A heavy wrench, a pipe wrench, big and menacing. I braked hard, stopping a safe distance away. The shotgun was already in my hand, my other hand pushing the door open, using it for cover. Clint, put the weapon down. Let the girl go. My voice was calm, steady, practiced. He screamed back, his voice raw, desperate. She's my daughter. You ain't taking her again. Just then, the passenger door creaked open. A woman, Marlene, emerged, her face pale, and clutched something tightly to her chest. Lily. The girl looked small, swallowed by the scene, her eyes wide with terror, her face streaked with tears. She was silent, utterly still. Clint's gaze flickered from me to Marlene and Lily, then back to me. It was a fractional moment, a hesitation born of torn loyalties and a desperate plan crumbling. That was my opening. I moved, quick and decisive. The shotgun dropped slightly, held in one hand as I covered the ground between us in a few powerful strides. Clint, caught off balance, still holding the wrench, stumbled backward as I hit him low, driving him into the dirt with a tackle that knocked the wind out of him. The wrench skittered across the dry ground. Marlene, startled, gasped and dropped Lily's hand. The girl froze, a deer in the headlights. Marlene turned, trying to bolt for the dark field behind the barn. Stay right there, I barked, my voice cutting through the ringing in my ears. I twisted Clint's arm, securing it behind his back, the cuffs already in my hand. He grunted, struggling for a moment, then went limp as the cold steel clicked shut around his wrists. Just as the second cuff locked, I heard the faint wail of distant sirens. Backup. Perfect timing. Lily, still standing frozen by the minivan, was safe. Shaken, yes, but unharmed. I walked over to her, kneeling down, my voice soft. It's all over now, kiddo. you're safe." I held her for a moment, her small, trembling body a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded and to the turmoil still churning in my own soul. The fluorescent lights of the station hummed, casting a pale, clinical glow over the stack of forms on my desk. Paperwork, endless and mind-numbing, followed every incident. Clint Sawyer's arrest, Lily's rescue, all reduced to lines and boxes. Liz Jenkins leaned against my cubicle wall, her coffee mug steaming. "Good work tonight, Dale," she said, her smile tired but genuine. Could have gone sideways out there. I managed a grunt, a non-committal sound. Satisfaction? No, there was none of that. Only a dull ache, a hollowness that seemed to have taken root since I read Sarah's message. The image of Lily, small and trembling, clutching my uniform, flashed in my mind. My own kids, safe in their beds, hopefully. Sarah. The thought of her brought a fresh wave of bitterness. I drove home, the dark quiet of the county roads feeling heavier than usual. The Crown Vic, usually a sanctuary, felt like a cage. Ahead, my house, a familiar silhouette against the sparse stars, had a light spilling from the kitchen window. A small domestic beacon. Sarah was there, her back to me, doing the dishes. The gentle clinking of plates was the only sound. She turned as I entered, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face was a strange mix of relief and something else. Something unreadable, lurking in her eyes. "You all right? Heard about the Amber Alert on the radio?" Her voice was too casual, too calm, like she was talking about the weather. "Yeah, got him," I grunted, shrugging off my duty belt, the familiar weight a small comfort against the growing unease. I hung it on the hook by the door. As I did, a faint, unfamiliar scent reached me, a sweet floral perfume, not Sarah's usual lighter fragrance. It hung in the air, a ghost in my own home. My eyes scanned the living room. Everything was in its place, but the air felt charged. I walked over to the couch, my fingers absently running over the worn fabric. Tucked deep in the folds of a cushion, my fingertips brushed against something small, hard. I pulled it out. A button. Not Sarah's, not mine. Small, pearlescent, with 4 tiny holes. My heart sank, a slow, heavy descent. I observed Sarah from the doorway, trying to piece together the fragments of this unsettling puzzle. Her movements were fluid, practiced, as she put away the last dish. But when my gaze lingered on her for too long, her eyes would dart away, seeking the safety of a wall, a window. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. A night last week, Sarah claiming to be at a book club. She'd come home unusually late, her explanation vague, a little too quick. I dismissed it then, another casualty of my own exhaustion. Now it felt like a missing piece clicking into place, grotesque and chilling. My uniform felt heavy, a physical manifestation of the burden I carried. The duty that extended even into the supposed sanctuary of my own house. I tried to talk about my day, about the chase, about Lily's terrified face. Kid looked like she'd seen a ghost. Poor thing. Sarah nodded, her attention already drifting. "That's good, Dale. You did good." Her responses were hollow, distracted. The words just sounds, not meaning. She wasn't really listening. She hadn't truly been there with me, not for a long time. Later in bed, I lay beside her, wide awake. Her breathing was soft, even. The house was utterly silent, a deceptive peace. I felt an immense distance between us, a chasm that had opened sometime, somewhere. The anger from Walt's message returned, cold and sharp, an icy grip on my chest. I pictured Walt, his slow, knowing smile. Then Sarah, her averted eyes. I considered what I'd do, what I could prove. The thought felt dirty beneath me, like I was sinking into something I couldn't quite name. Investigating my own wife, in my own home. It was a betrayal far more intimate than any I'd faced on the road. I closed my eyes, wishing for the simple dangers of the road, the clear-cut lines of right and wrong, anything but this quiet ache of uncertainty and doubt that had taken root in my heart. The next morning, I moved through the house with a practiced, deliberate normalcy. The aroma of stale coffee hung in the kitchen. My movements were slow, precise, like a man searching for something he couldn't quite name. Sarah was still asleep, or pretending to be. I made myself toast, the scrape of the knife on the ceramic plate loud in the quiet house. Then I saw it. Sarah's old flip phone, the one she usually kept tucked away in a drawer, charging near the back door. She rarely used it, preferring her smartphone for everything. A cold, precise gut feeling settled in my stomach. It wasn't curiosity, it was something else, a grim determination. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. The screen flickered to life. The messages were sparse, coded, but damning. A quick scroll through showed a pattern. Late-night texts, unusual numbers. My thumb hovered over a message from an unsaved number, but the content spoke volumes. Can't wait for tonight, W. Another, a reply. Thinking of you, S. The initials were enough. Walt, Sarah. Then I saw it. A photo nestled deep in the gallery. A quick selfie. Sarah and Walt Jensen, leaning close, too close, in a dimly lit bar. Walt's arm was around her, his smile wide, possessive. Sarah's head was tilted against his shoulder, her eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in them for a long time. It was undeniable. A punch to the gut. The world tilted. The flip phone slipped from my grasp, hitting the worn linoleum floor with a clatter that echoed in the quiet kitchen. The sound seemed to shatter the fragile peace of the morning. Numbness spread through me first, then a searing heat, like I'd swallowed embers. Sarah walked in then, her hair still disheveled from sleep, a mug in her hand, her eyes still heavy-lidded, flickered to the phone on the floor, then to my face. The realization dawned on her, stark and immediate. Her eyes widened, guilt flashing across them, bright and raw. "Dale, I can explain," she started, her voice thin, desperate, like a caught animal. I cut her off, my voice low, dangerous, barely above a whisper. "Explain what, Sarah? Explain Walt Jensen. Explain, can't wait to see you tonight?" Each word was a chipped stone thrown hard. She flinched, her composure crumbling. The mug in her hand trembled. Tears welled up in her eyes, not falling yet, but pooled and shimmering. It just happened. Just happened? I felt a laugh bubble up, bitter and broken, a sound I didn't recognize. After all these years, all we built? I gestured around the kitchen, at the life we had made, the house we had poured ourselves into. It felt like a stage, the props still there, but the play long over. She confessed then, a torrent of words, justifications, apologies, explanations about loneliness, about feeling overlooked, unseen. Her voice rose and fell, punctuated by soft sobs. I barely heard them over the ringing in my ears, the sound of the foundation of my life cracking, the good soil turning to dust. It was like listening to someone else's story, a mere distant tale that had nothing to do with me. "Get out," I said, the words flat, devoid of any emotion. It wasn't a question, not a plea, just a simple, cold statement. "Just get out." Sarah stared at me, her face streaked with tears, a silent plea in her eyes that I could not, would not answer. Then slowly, silently, she turned. I watched her pack a small bag, the zipper a harsh rip in the quiet. Her movements were resigned, defeated. The click of the front door closing behind her was deafening, leaving me alone in the house, surrounded by the ruins of a life I thought I knew. I walked into the station the next day, the fluorescent lights harsh against my tired eyes. My uniform felt stiff, a costume. I moved like a hollow shell, each step deliberate, designed to avoid eye contact with anyone, especially Walt. The air in the precinct felt heavy, thick with unspoken things. "Morning, Peterson. Heard you nabbed that Sawyer fella out by Miller's place. Good work, Dale." Walt Jensen, slick and composed as always, was leaning against Liz's desk, a confident smirk playing on his lips. His voice was hearty, too hearty, cutting through the usual morning chatter. My response was a guttural sound, a strained grunt that wasn't quite a word. I felt his gaze, knowing and smug, settling on me, peeling away layers I hadn't realized were so thin. He knew I knew. That was the game. Liz Jenkins glanced my way, her expression a careful mix of concern and curiosity. Small towns talked, and this town was no different. Whatever had happened with Sarah, whatever Walt had done, it wouldn't stay quiet for long. The gossip would spread, a slow-moving stain. Later, I overheard whispers in the break room, hushed tones that ceased abruptly when I entered. "Something's off with Dale." "Yeah, and Walt's been different." The words were vague, but the meaning was clear enough. They were watching, wondering. My assignment came down from Walt himself, a property theft case, a string of burglaries at remote farmsteads, working directly under him. The irony was a cruel twist of the knife, embedding deeper into my gut. Walt gave orders, his voice too loud, too confident, outlining the areas to patrol, the leads to follow. I barely managed a nod, my jaw tight, resentment burning a slow fuse within me. Each word from him was a fresh wound. During a briefing on the theft case, Walt, gesturing expansively at a map of the county, made a casual comment about loyalty being the bedrock of their department. My fist clenched under the table, knuckles white. The urge to snap, to shatter the calm facade was almost overwhelming. It was a struggle to keep my face neutral, to breathe evenly. I found myself fantasizing about exposing Walt, about finding some undeniable proof of his corruption, bringing his world crashing down around him. But the professional code, the oath I'd taken, held me back. Barely. It was a thin thread. As the story unfolds, we see how life's costly choices unravel, forcing difficult decisions that forever alter paths. I threw myself into the property theft case with a desperate ferocity. It was a distraction, a way to channel the rage that simmered beneath my skin. The burglaries were simple, crude. Tools, scrap metal, old farm equipment stolen from abandoned barns and sheds. But I worked it like it was a homicide, meticulously, relentlessly. While out on patrol or even just in the office, I started noticing Walt making unusual calls, stepping out of the office for hushed conversations, his back to the wall, his voice low. Nothing concrete, just instinct, a cop's gut feeling. "Just doing my job," I reminded myself, repeating it like a mantra. But the line between duty and personal vendetta blurred a little more with each passing hour. It felt less like a mum and more like a hunt. I felt isolated, surrounded by people who either knew or would soon know the details of my crumbling life. And Walt, the architect of my pain, moved freely, effortlessly, through it all. Every interaction with him was a test of my control, a tightrope walk over an abyss I could feel yawning beneath me. Returning to my empty house that night, the silence was deafening, amplifying my rage and despair. The ghost of Sarah's floral perfume still lingered faintly in the living room. I just needed a way out, an answer, something to break the suffocating quiet. The property theft case, a slow, tedious grind of interviews and inventory lists, gave me an excuse to dig, to look at things under a different light. Walt ironically had assigned me to it, probably thinking it would keep me busy, distracted. He didn't know I was looking past the obvious, searching for the shadows. I started pulling old case files, reports Walt had handled in the past. Small details, easy to overlook, started to jump out. Dates that didn't quite add up with patrol logs, witness statements that seemed incomplete. Nothing glaring, just tiny fractures in the surface. Then I started cross-referencing Walt's patrol logs with specific reports, looking for patterns, for absences that stretched longer than they should. It was tedious work, the kind of grunt labor no one wanted. But I had time, too much time now that Sarah was gone. A series of routine checks Walt had logged began to stand out. Not regular patrols, but specific addresses, times. And then it clicked. Those times, those dates, seemed to coincide with periods Sarah had claimed to be out with friends, or at that phantom book club. The pieces, once disconnected, began to slot together, forming a grim mosaic. One night I found myself talking to an old confidential informant, a small-time dealer I'd busted years ago. He was out of the game, working an honest job now, but he'd always had an ear to the ground. After a few casual questions, he whispered about Walt. "Gambling debts," he said. "A quiet rumor from years ago, dismissed as bar talk, but it resurfaced now, a fresh lead. He always seemed to have more than he should, Dale. Knew a guy who said Walt was into some real shady stuff, way back when. That sent me down a new rabbit hole. I pulled public property records using the station's discreet access. It took a few late nights, feigning work on the theft case, but I found it. An unregistered cabin, tucked away on the far side of the county, listed under a shell company. No one knew Walt owned it. That ain't right for a captain's salary, I muttered to the empty office. Not even a captain's salary, generous as it was, could explain a hidden property. The moral dilemma weighed heavy on me, a constant pressure. I considered leaking the information, anonymously. A tip to the local paper, maybe to Internal Affairs. But then, would I be any better? Was I becoming just like him, using deceit to achieve my ends? Am I becoming just like him? I asked the silence of the station, the question hanging unanswered. Buried deep in the archives, under a pile of forgotten HR complaints, I found it. An old complaint dismissed without action from a junior officer. It detailed Walt's inappropriate conduct with a civilian, a woman involved in a minor traffic incident. The report was vague, but the undertones were clear. Another thread, the web of evidence slowly, meticulously formed. Hints of financial impropriety, abuse of authority, and a pervasive pattern of deception. It was all there, tucked away in dusty files and obscure databases. A cold satisfaction settled in me, a bitter, hollow victory, but it was tempered by a growing unease. This wasn't justice, not really. This was something darker, something personal, an obsession born of betrayal. I took photos with my personal phone, made copies of documents, building a file that grew thicker each night. Each document felt like a piece of my shattered life, painstakingly collected, to be used as a weapon. I imagined Walt's downfall, his smug face replaced by fear, by the dawning realization that his carefully constructed world was crumbling. It was a bitter fantasy, a fleeting moment of power that offered no real solace. "What's the endgame, Dale?" I asked my reflection in the dark office window, the glass throwing back a tired, haunted face. "What's it all for?" The question had no answer, just the steady thrum of the station, the distant hum of the refrigerators. The thought of confronting Walt with the file, with all the meticulous proof of his corruption, was both exhilarating and terrifying. The quiet reckoning I knew was approaching. The file, thick with photocopies and printouts, felt heavy in my hand as I walked into Walt's office. The door closed behind me with a soft click, sealing us in. His office was neat, almost sterile, a stark contrast to the mess his life had made of mine. He looked up from his computer, a practiced smile on his face that quickly dissolved when he saw my expression. The file. "You think I didn't see it, Walt?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that churned inside me. I laid the file on his desk, sliding it across the polished wood until it stopped just inches from his hand. The top page showed the cabin's property records. Walt's composure, usually ironclad, cracked. His eyes narrowed, a defensive snarl replacing his earlier casual demeanor. He leaned forward, pushing the file back towards me with a flick of his wrist. "You'll regret this, Peterson. You got nothing." I said nothing, just met his gaze, letting the silence hang heavy between us. He knew what was in that file. He knew what I had. Word of the confrontation spread through the station like wildfire. It started as whispers, then became hushed conversations, finally culminating in an email from the sheriff's office. An internal investigation had been launched. It was quiet, swift, and unavoidable. A few days later, I was called into the sheriff's office. My badge and gun were taken. Temporary leave, effective immediately. I felt stripped bare, vulnerable, a stranger in my own skin without the familiar weight of my duty belt. Sarah, caught in the escalating scandal, wasn't spared either. The small town had a long memory and a cruel tongue. She lost her part-time job at the local diner. Her name, once just a name, was now whispered on Main Street, tied to scandal, to Walt, to me. But the real blow landed closer to home. My kids, young Mark and Susie, they came home from school with their shoulders slumped, their eyes downcast. Kids are cruel. Your mom's the one who... I heard snippets, whispers of taunts, of fingers pointed. Your mom's the one who broke up the family. I saw the raw pain in my children's eyes, the confusion, the shame they shouldn't have to carry. The grim satisfaction I'd felt in building that file, in pursuing Walt, began to sour, turning into a bitter, indigestible regret. This wasn't supposed to happen to them. They were innocent. Walt, leveraging his connections, his years of ingrained power, began to paint a different picture. Dale Peterson, unstable, vengeful, driven by personal bias. He cited the affair, my marital troubles, as the sole motivation for my investigation. It gained traction. The local paper, usually filled with Harvest Festival announcements and high school football scores, picked up the story. Vague at first, then bolder. Sheriff's Department embroiled in internal scandal. The details, distorted and embellished, started trickling into the public sphere. I faced intense questioning from internal affairs. Hours spent under the glare of their lights, my integrity scrutinized, my personal life laid bare, picked apart like a carcass. Every decision, every action, every motive, questioned. Sarah called me, her voice desperate, pleading. Dale, please, think of the kids. We're losing everything. Her words, once hollow, now held a raw honesty that cut deep. I realized then that my quest for retribution had become a destructive force, a wildfire consuming everything in its path. My family, my career, my reputation, all reduced to ash. The line I had blurred between justice and revenge had led me to a precipice, and I was dangerously close to tumbling over. I considered dropping it, letting it all go, letting Walt win, letting the silence fall. But the sheer weight of Walt's deceit, the corruption I had unearthed, held me firm. To let it go now would be to validate everything he had done, to surrender to the injustice. I sat in my empty living room, the quiet more profound than ever. The silence of my house, the silence of my family's broken lives, echoed. I wondered if anything at all could be salvaged from the wreckage. I hit rock bottom. The days bled into one another, marked only by the growing dust on the furniture and the hollow ache in my stomach. Meals became an afterthought, sleep a fleeting escape. The once clean house, a reflection of Sarah's meticulous nature, now mirrored the disarray in my mind. Old Gus Miller, my neighbor, a man who'd seen more than his share of life's troubles, showed up one afternoon. He carried a casserole, still warm, wrapped in foil. He didn't say much, just set it on the counter. Tough times, son, he offered, his voice raspy. Just keep breathing. The simple words, a small act of kindness, chipped away at the hardened shell around my heart. A few days later, Liz Jenkins called. Not officially, not on the precinct line. Just a friendly check-in from her personal phone. Don't let him break you, Dale, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. You're a good man. Don't forget that. It was a lifeline, small but significant. Then Sarah showed up at the house. She looked drawn, pale, shadows under her eyes that matched mine. She didn't beg, didn't yell, didn't try to explain away anything. She just sat on the couch quietly. I made a mess, Dale, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. We talked. Stilted at first, words catching in our throats, then raw, exposing open wounds. There was no forgiveness, not yet, perhaps never. But there was a shared understanding, a bleak recognition of the destruction we'd both wrought, the wildfire we'd ignited. It wasn't about who was right or wrong anymore. It was about the wreckage. I realized then that my revenge, while damaging to Walt, hadn't healed me. It hadn't filled the hollow space. It had only deepened the wound, twisted it into something ugly. The satisfaction I'd felt was fleeting, replaced by a bitter emptiness. My focus shifted. Mark and Susie, my children. They were the casualties of this war. I called the school, talked to the principal, standing up for my kids against the whispers, against the cruel innocence of their peers. I was their father, and I would protect them. I contacted a divorce lawyer, beginning the painful, bureaucratic process of dissolving my marriage. But I also called a family therapist, a name Liz had quietly given me. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about building a different future, a way forward for my kids, even if it meant navigating it alone. I provided my full evidence to internal affairs, but with a new perspective. Not as a vengeful husband, but as an officer seeking institutional justice, accountability for a man who had abused his power. It wasn't personal anymore. It was about the job, about doing what was right. Walt Jensen, facing mounting evidence from my file and the quiet pressure from internal affairs, quietly resigned before official charges were filed. The official statement cited health reasons. The news spread through Mason County, a muted sense of justice in the air. But there was no celebration for me, no triumphant feeling, just a quiet, weary relief. I started going for long runs down the country roads again, the familiar rhythm of my feet on the asphalt a small comfort. It was a way to clear my head, to find a new rhythm, a new way of being, outside the uniform, outside the anger. I volunteered at the local community center, helping out with odd jobs, teaching kids how to play chess. It was a quiet purpose, a way to connect, to rebuild, piece by piece, something beyond myself, beyond my shattered life. Dale and Sarah began co-parenting, a fragile, difficult piece. Our love was gone, extinguished, but a different kind of respect might be possible. For the kids, for the years we shared. One afternoon, I packed up Sarah's remaining things from the house. A few old books, a box of photographs, a faded sweater. Each item was a memory, a ghost. The quiet act was a final, painful acceptance. Acceptance that some things cannot be fixed, only endured. Months later, the dust in Mason County had mostly settled, but the scars remained, quiet and deep, like old riverbeds carved into the land. I found work at the local co-op, security. Less excitement, more steady, reflective time. The call of the badge was still there, a faint echo, but I felt it from a distance now. Walt Jensen was rarely seen in town. Rumor had it he'd moved out to the next county, a small, unremarkable place. Sarah found a job at a clinic in Red River Falls, settling into an apartment there. She saw Mark and Susie every weekend, and the kids, still confused, were slowly finding their footing in this new, fractured family. Sometimes I'd drive past the old gas station where I'd caught Clint Sawyer, the past a weight I carried, but also a stern teacher. I found solace in the small rhythms of rural life, the changing seasons, the quiet mornings, the honest work. Liz Jenkins still called sometimes, a friendly voice, a reminder of what was. I learned to live with the quiet emptiness in my house, in the quiet acceptance that slowly took root in my heart. There was no grand victory, no dramatic closure, just the slow, steady process of rebuilding. I saw the world with new, tired eyes, understanding the fragile nature of trust, the heavy cost of choices. One evening I sat on my porch, watching the sun set over the cornfields, a vast, indifferent beauty. I thought of Sarah, of Walt, of the child Lily, and of the tangled mess of human lives we all inhabited. Morality, I realized, wasn't a straight line, but a winding path through shaded woods and open fields. Dale Peterson, forged by betrayal and duty, simply continued, one quiet, deliberate step at a time. The life he built shattered, but a new, harder, more honest one began to take root.